Okay. I wanted to start with the timeline. Okay, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna, crap, that's the wrong timeline, it figures. Why do I have the wrong timeline in here? March. Why is it there? There it is. That?
Did you fix it? Is it the one that you, that was wrong before?
Yeah, I did. I actually fixed it, and I'm trying to, there it is. Okay, let me show you guys the timeline real quick. Come on. All right, there it is. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I fix it? I don't know if there's an actually known date of this year, D. But you can see I changed it from, I think it was 567. I just added 4 years to it. So if you figured 7 years from that would have been 564. And then he would have died a year or two after that. So would have left us somewhere around this point. Can you guys see that? Did I just make it small on your screen?
Yeah, but I can pinch
There you
it and
go.
make it bigger. It's on my phone.
Okay. So what we're gonna do tonight, and I'm trying, did you still see the timeline?
Now we see your notes.
Okay. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go real quickly through what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He dies, obviously, right at this point in 562. He seems to have died. His son, evil Merodach. Let me see if I can zoom in a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah, that's good.
Okay. Now I'm trying to remember how to make, how do I make the screen behind it, which is my notes. Let me just pull it up on my tablet here. His son becomes king. His name is Evil Merodach. Okay, I have it. So we can see here, his son, his immediate son, assumes the throne. And he's described, and he's in power maybe 2 years. Okay, so maybe from 62 to 60-ish. He is mentioned in 2 Kings 25. He's also mentioned in Jeremiah 52. He shows, I don't know if you guys remember, but when they first came down to Jerusalem and took over, they grabbed the existing king that was in Judah or Jerusalem, and they brought him back to Babylon and threw him in jail. And he had been in jail for, I think it was like 37 years or something like that.
Wow.
And this
Good
guy,
Lord.
sorry?
I said, good Lord.
Yeah, I know, a long time, right?
Yeah.
So this guy, Evil Merodach, or Amel Marduk, however you want to say his name, lets the Judah, the king from Jerusalem, out of jail, and he lets him eat at his table. Now, that seems a very kind thing, except it seemed to have made a lot of people angry, especially some of his political enemies. And he was assassinated by this guy, Meriglasar. All right, about 2 years later, he's assassinated. Now, Meriglasar says this evil Merodach, his rule was arbitrary and licentious. Some of that may have been as a result of him letting the king of Judah out and inviting him to eat at the king's table in Babylon, which is odd. But anyway, so he murders Evil Merodach, and I neglected.
Who does? Wait, who murders him?
This guy right here, Neriglasar. Okay, he assassinates Nebuchadnezzar's son, Evil Merodach, 2 years later. Okay,
And
so
that's his brother-in-law too. It says it's his son, it's Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law. So that's Evil Merodach's brother-in-law.
it's his brother-in-law. I think from an older sister
Okay,
of the guy he murdered, Evil Merodach. It could have even been his sister from a different marriage or like a half sister of some sort.
yeah.
So there seemed to be a power struggle and all kinds of insanities going on in Babylon at this point. This guy seems to assume the throne along with Nebuchadnezzar's daughter, who would be his wife. And he stays in power till I believe he dies. He dies naturally. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, he's also or was a general in Nebuchadnezzar's army and may very well have been one of the guys that was in charge when they went down to Jerusalem to originally take all those people back, or maybe when they went to Jerusalem to, to destroy the temple because the people that had remained in Jerusalem had rebelled, and so they went down and destroyed everything. There's some numbskulls. But anyway, this guy had been a general, and I guess he had the military behind him. So he kills Evil Merodach. He assumes power. He is there for what, 4 years till 556. He dies, and his son, I don't know how you pronounce it, Laburo Soarchad.
Wait, it says Labashi Marduk.
That's
What's
another. That's just like the Babylonish name. Like
Uh,
Marduk is the name of one of their gods.
oh,
So his son assumes the throne, and supposedly he was only a child, and he had diminished mental capacity. He only ruled for anywhere from I think 4 to 9 months when he was beaten to death by a gang of conspirators.
oh my God.
Yeah, so the insanity that's kind of going on in this land at this point. And so he's beaten, he's assassinated, and somebody right here, Nabonidus, assumes the throne. Now, Nabonidus was one of the conspirators, or he was part of the conspiracy, and he's appointed king. So he's king from 550, what do they say, 553-ish, 550, yeah, 553 to the end of, when Babylon's taken over all the way down here. Okay. Let me see what my notes said. He ruled until Cyrus came and conquered Babylon. Cyrus was from Persia, or maybe he was part of the Medes and the Persians. But when the neighboring country comes and hijacks and takes over Babylon. Now, the thing about this guy is Nabonidus, he rules, or he spends his time in Arabia instead of Babylon. So he neglects, one of the things that he did, again, that ticked people off, he neglected their main god named Marduk, and was interested in elevating a moon god named Zin. It looks like sin, but it's actually pronounced Zin. So this angered the priestly class, and his own mother, this guy Nabonidus, his own mother was a high priestess to the sin god. So he's spending all his time in a place called Telma or Tiama in Arabia, and he puts his son Belshazzar here as his, I'm trying to think of the name, maybe like a crown prince to rule from Babylon. So that's who Belshazzar is, the son of Nabonidus. So he reigns and does the day-to-day duties from Babylon. And that's where we're going to begin the story. In essence, son and dad are kind of co-doing it from like maybe 553 all the way to 539. And that's where the story starts.
Mhm.
Okay. So
539 is where the story starts.
yeah, as a matter of fact, we're going to start at Daniel 1. So the story begins in 539, And the stories about Belshazzar. Remember, Belshazzar is technically referred to as the king, but I think his father's technically the real king. He's just the crown prince who does the day-to-day. And history says this is sometime in October of 539, possibly October 11th. I know it doesn't mean
Wow.
anything, but they have it like history says this is the date that the nation fell, the nation of Babylon. So if you guys want to start in 5:1-4.
5 or, oh wait, never mind, sorry.
And I'm going to switch back. And
So-
unstate this.
So, Daniel 5:1-4.
Yeah.
King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Every time I read the son of somebody, I always just assume it's just their son, but I know it's different.
What do you mean?
They always, I feel like they always say son of so and so, but it could be like generations and they still call him son of.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But
So
he
he
was
means,
really-
then it means descendant, right?
Yeah.
Like Nebuchadnezzar's father, is that what you mean? Like when it says?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, because it wasn't his real father. It could have been his grandfather. But I'm not sure, but yes, I think you're right. So we
I
have,
think your note said that. Your note said that he was the son of the daughter of.
That his mother's either the wife or daughter of Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
Is awkward.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry. Deb.
you're talking about one of those other kings. I think the way it was Nebuchadnezzar followed by his son, who lasted 2 years, followed by his son's brother-in-law, who would have been married to the guy that was assassinated, sister, and then the people beyond that, which would have been where we are now, Belshazzar and his dad, Nabonidus, whatever his name is. I don't know if they're technically bloodline, even though it says that. I don't know if they really are, but
Okay.
anyway, large feast by Belshazzar with thousands of his lords. 1,000, I just looked it up. 1,000 could be literal, probably just a very large number, but it could be literal. Now, one of the things I noticed in here is how many is they're drinking a lot of wine here. I noticed in verse 1, Meg, you said drinks wine or drank wine in verse 1. In verse 2, he tasted the wine. In the end of verse 2, they drink from therefrom, which I'm assuming is from those goblets or whatever, the gold, silver
Yeah.
vessels. The end of 3, they drank from them. And then in verse 4, they drank wine. So they're probably feeling pretty good at this point. I had 5 times mentioned there. So Belshazzar commands the gold, silver vessels. That is not his father, but Nebuchadnezzar had taken probably from 2 Kings 24 and 25, and also from 2 Chronicles 36. And I think Daniel 1, verse 2, we've read before. It makes mention of him taking the gold and silver goblets from there. Now I wonder, and I wonder if these had ever been brought out before.
Yeah. I was thinking the
It
same
seems-
thing.
It seems like they had not been taken out. Based on, I read this, I guess, a couple weeks ago and it just seems like they didn't ever take them out before, which is odd. What made them think of them then? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Drinking.
Yeah, but like, why would they pop into his head?
Yeah,
That was
why,
years prior.
yeah, why those in particular? And they praise the gods of gold, silver, brass, wood, and stone. And you think there's significance?
Yeah, didn't we study all them? Did we look up this verse when you were looking up all the verses?
I think we did, and I know what I think it refers to. But I know we obviously did the gold, silver, brass, or bronze or brass, however you want to say it. And then the clay and the brass, which were part of that statue.
Right.
I think we even made mention at a different time there was precious stones and actually I don't know if we did or not. I'm not really sure about the wood and stone, although I thought the wood at one point represented something from Corinthians, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
So why aren't we talking about the wood and the hay or
Yeah.
straw?
Now, what I think they're doing is in Romans 1:25, if you could turn there real quick. And by the way, Augustine's still working.
Oh,
So
What?
she's working. They have so much work and they had a whole bunch of meetings, so they got pushed behind. And
Oh, it's awful. So tiring.
so this is one of the things I think would, ascribe to this. Somebody wants to read Romans 1:25.
one. I'm like, there is no 125.
Romans 1 verse 25.
Sorry.
You want to read it?
All right. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen.
So this would be one of the things that they're doing. They're worshiping the created instead of the creator here.
Like the product.
Yeah.
Like the gods of what they think to be gods of. Now, why they seem to have gods ascribed to one god for gold, another one for silver, another one for brass is beyond me.
Yeah, I know. I don't even understand why they feel the need to say each of them are gods. Do you know what I mean? Why do they need to worship made up gods?
Or yeah, and with that in mind, what doesn't have a god? Like, how would you determine? Well, why would you give wood a god?
God of wood. I don't know.
I wonder if it's like you know how like the Indian, like the Native Americans, like have all these like they're like the god of wind,
Spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Like
That's
they
what kind of
assign
reminded
a spirit to things.
me. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't either. Now, the significance of praising these items or the created while drinking out of, excuse me, gold, silver vessels. And I wondered if it's similar to Revelation 9:20. You can turn there real quick. Revelation 9:20.
Oh, 9:20.
9:20.
It says, the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshiping demons and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood. Idols that cannot be seen, cannot see or hear or walk.
So there's some link, because it's not happenstance that there's the same thing mentioned. And if you think about, this is the very end of the kingdom of Babylon. And of course, in Revelation, God's kingdom eventually that he has here on earth eventually morphs into Babylon. And it would seem to be at the point where that Babylon is about to be judged. So we have, again, I'm jumping ahead because this is something I was going to talk about next week, but you have on one hand the natural Babylon in Daniel, and then the spiritual Babylon being referenced in Revelation. And there's a lot of correlation, which we'll probably get to next time. But here it's talking about the mentioning of the worshiping of these exact same things and how they're being judged for it in some form in that passage in Revelation. So
Right.
back to Daniel.
With Daniel 5, I feel like there's something too where it talks about how they don't what did he describe it as? I remember thinking like, how could they think it's a god if it doesn't listen, hear, or see or whatever?
I don't know.
It says
It-
I think it said that in Daniel 5 too, when it talks about the god of gold, silver, and something.
Maybe it's coming up.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe it's what? I'm sorry. What did you say?
Maybe it's coming up, but I remember them talking about that too.
Like we're gonna read it soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, it's mentioned again a little further on. Back to Daniel 5, and Meg, I think when we get to the next instance of it, it'll be pretty evident
Yeah.
how God feels about, that. But somebody reads 5 through 8.
I'll read. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. The king summoned the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. Then he said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around their neck and will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom.
And 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant.
So the king sees the fingers of a hand writing on the wall near the lampstand of the palace.
Right?
Any thoughts why he would see that?
What came to mind as I first read this was, remember when Jesus squatted down and was writing in the sand, and
Yeah.
he wouldn't answer anybody even though they were talking to him, and he was just writing. That's what came to mind when this started writing on the hand started writing on the wall. I don't know if that has any correlation, but
That's good.
I
Bill.
was thinking, how did the chalk, I don't know why I thought it was chalk, but how did it hold it? Because it was said fingers.
Oh, I thought he scratched it into the wall. That's what I always thought.
Oh,
And then I was thinking, and another thing that I noticed is, I was thinking, I feel like when I was younger, I remember them thinking it was like a big hand. But like when
Yeah.
I read it now, I was thinking, I wonder if it just looked like a little hand writing it.
yeah, I don't know.
a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, all good questions. I think you may be onto something, Dee, when you said that. I don't know anything about the chalk. I assumed he had some writing utensil in his hand, but I'm not sure. I hadn't even thought about whether he did it with his finger or not.
No, me either. I never thought of that either, but I did. Just the first thing that popped into my head was, remember when she down and ignored them and was writing in the sand.
And
He
you
kept
don't know what it said, right? In the sand?
Right.
No, I don't think so.
Did we talk about that before? Writing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too is you'll find out that this has more significance in a spiritual way. What does the hand represent? What does a finger represent?
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit next week, because I think that has significance to the end time Babylon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the king sees this, his brightness is altered, or his thoughts were alarming. The joints of his loins were loosened.
Hmm.
What that means.
The joints of
Is
his
that where it says his knees were knocking?
Yeah, I think so. Where's that at?
So the joints of his
6.
loins were loosened and his knees smote one another. So that's separate thought in King James, Don.
His legs became weak and his knees were knocking.
You know what else is interesting in that particular phrase? We're gonna see later on. The phrase is reversed when it's the description of Daniel. But if you look the words up, it says the doubts of his vigor unraveled. If you put it in a metaphoric language, but it could very well be maybe he pooped himself, maybe he couldn't stand. Who knows?
Yeah.
So his knees knocked together, they gave out. Maybe have a panic attack. I don't know. I probably would be.
I would be freaked out. Yeah.
So he calls in his wise men in verse
8.
7.
Oh.
And then in 8, they come in and it's the same. He calls the wise men in like Nebuchadnezzar did in chapter 4, and I think in chapter 2 too, right?
Yep.
So for some reason, the king says, whoever can read and interpret this will be clothed in purple, given a chain of gold around their neck, and elevated to the third ruler. First of all, I wonder what the significance is of purple.
Was
It
everybody
was the color of
there?
royalty. Wasn't purple the color of royalty?
Yeah, I think it was done.
I
I
think
think you're right.
I think it is, but I think it's also representative of something in the end time Babylon too.
Oh, wow.
What did
Okay.
you say, Meg?
Did people like witness this, or was it just him?
No, I think they were all there. I think
Oh,
they were all watching. Also, he's given a chain, or he would be given a chain, and they, whoever interprets will be elevated to the third ruler. Who's the first ruler?
Maybe his dad, didn't you say?
I think so. Dad would be probably 1. He'd probably be 2, and then whoever would do this would be 3.
oh.
Whoever could interpret would be 3. So the king's wise men can't read or interpret. Somebody want to do 9 through 12?
So the king Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. Hearing the voices of the king and his nobles came into the banquet hall. May the king live forever, she said. Don't be alarmed. Don't be so pale. Don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your king, your father, Ezra, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means.
Okay, so he's greatly troubled. Now I wonder if he says to himself, wow, like I've heard these stories about, what happened to Nebuchadnezzar, but I never, would have like dreamed, or thought it would have ever happened to me,
Hey, right.
Yeah.
And the first thing he probably thought was, I'm going to go out and eat grass and live in the fields. That's what's going to happen to me.
I know, right? Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And Meg or Don, whoever it was, asked about, did he say it himself? It says the nobles are confused here in one of the early on verses. The lords were perplexed, so they saw something too.
Yeah. I didn't know if if they were the people that he called in. That's what I was like, were they the people that he called in to see it?
At the I think they were his nobles and his lords, or however you want to call them. I think so. So they must have all been sitting there having a grand old time when this happens, and they're shocked back to reality. So the queen arrives and says the phrase that we've seen those addressing the king, who seems to say, "Oh Lord," or "Oh King, live forever," right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Even
So
Daniel says it.
does he say it too?
He says it to Nebuchadnezzar.
He says it's a Nebuchadnezzar, which is interesting, the way the way he treats this guy versus the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she says, have you considered Daniel? So the spirit of the holy gods is in him, and she says the spirit of the holy gods, not God.
Yes, she does.
I saw that.
In thy father's days, light, understanding, and wisdom, and as wisdom of the gods. And Nebuchadnezzar made him chief of wise men. So I wonder, do you think he's still chief of wise men?
Hmm.
It doesn't sound like it, right?
I
know
don't,
that's what he was.
huh?
What, Max?
I don't know.
Well,
Wouldn't Belshazzar know?
I started looking up all these people and I was like, oh my gosh, like how could he still be like ruler over them and they're all like magical and I don't know.
Yeah, I get you. Because in that verse that Dar showed us in Revelation, if you read above it and below it, they talked about people who, just like the enchanters and the Chaldeans, is that what they're called? An astrologer, magicians, that they wouldn't give it up. And I thought, yikes, that sounds just like the people we're reading about in Daniel.
right.
Mhm.
So yeah, I thought maybe, this guy had been on the throne for anywhere from 13 to 15 or some years, or 16 years. You would think he'd have some idea who this Daniel guy
Right.
was,
Right.
especially if he's still the chief of the wise men. I know, so and as we go down a little further, I think you'll see that Daniel must have been pretty darn old.
Like he retired.
Well, I think when they first got taken, and him and a bunch of the kids or whatever, who we want to assume they were 15 at the time, and that would have been around 604. So if they were 15 around 604, and we're talking 61 plus 4, 65 years later,
Wow.
it's probably about 80. something like
Yeah.
that. But anyway, I know we're about ready to run out of time. The queen continues and says Daniel's an excellent spirit and a sense of understanding and interpreting dreams, and he declares hard riddles and the dissolving of doubts, which is when she says the dissolving of doubts, it's the same phrase that is used for Belshazzar when the joints of his loins are loosened. Here the two words are switched, and it's dissolving of doubt. Dissolving is loosen, and doubts is joints. So were they saying about Belshazzar, he was suddenly incredibly full of doubts at the instant that happened? Well, I don't think that would fall too far from how anybody would feel if they were in his shoes.
Agreed.
Where did it switch it?
If
In
you
the
look the
Bible?
word, if you just look the words up in Hebrew in
Oh.
Daniel 6, Meg, it talks about Belshazzar's joints of his loins that were loosened.
Oh.
The word joints and loosened are the same words that are used in opposite way for description of Daniel in verse 12, where it's describing him as dissolver or dissolving of doubt. So Daniel comes on the scene.
Okay, I see.
So maybe it's the complete opposite for Belshazzar
Yeah.
in that instance. Anyway, we're going to cut off, and then we'll be right back, and then we'll pick up with 13.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
See you in a minute.
Bye.